Beyond knowing that God created the world, Abraham introduced this notion that God is the only being worthy of your worship. Should everybody in the world become Jewish? Is that a goal? Is that an objective? Is that a utopian dream? Everyone will be Jewish? No, it's not. God doesn't make mistakes. There are 70 nations. Back in the olden days, there were 70 nations, and God chose one nation to be Jewish, or chose the Jewish people to be Jewish. Obviously, that's enough. It would be really ridiculous to even suggest that the vast majority of human beings are not what they're meant to be. They're all meant to be Jewish. It's absurd. God creates what he needs. So, can any non-Jew become a Jew? Hypothetically, yes. Doors always open. But realistically speaking, no. There are Jews and there are non-Jews, and that's how it must be. That's best for God's plan. Then there are certain people who are destined to become Jewish somewhere along the course of their life. They weren't born Jewish, but they're destined to be Jewish. Those are the converts who become Jews. Those who are not destined are, first of all, really not motivated to become Jewish. They're not interested. They don't feel compelled. And even if they're curious, that's not conversion. Conversion is a compulsion. A person who converts for real will tell you that they had no choice. They couldn't help it. They just had to. So essentially, there's no such thing as a Jew by choice. There was a famous rabbi, Reb Zushia. One of the most famous quotes is that Reb Zushia said, "When I get to heaven, I'm not afraid that they're going to ask me, why wasn't I like Moses? Why wasn't I like Abraham? I'm afraid they're going to ask me, why wasn't I Zushia? Why wasn't I who God created me to be?" The same is true with Jews and non-Jews. Should a Jew wish he was not Jewish? Should a non-Jew wish he was Jewish? Sounds a little selfish, a little indulgent. I would like to be a little angel. I would like to be an alien. So, another famous quote from Reb Zushia was when they asked him, "Would you love to be Abraham?" He said no. They said, "Oh, come on. Abraham was a great guy. Wouldn't you rather be him?" And Reb Zushia's answer was, God needed an Abraham, so he created Abraham. God needed a Zushia, and he created a Zushia. What's the difference? Who is who? As long as there's an Abraham and there's a Zushia, God has what he needs. In other words, if I was being selfish, if I was being indulgent, if I was being greedy on a spiritual level, I would want to be the greatest, the holiest. But that's not what's important. What's important is everything in God's creation should be what God created it to be. So if you were created to be Zusya, then be Zusya. Because God needs a Zusya. I would rather be Avraham. God already has an Avraham. So if you're not Jewish, to wish I was Jewish is like, this is not a Mr. Potato Head where you can rearrange your features and be who you wish to be. We are who we are because that's what God needs in his world. Why he needs it, we don't know. We don't know why God needs vegetables. We don't know why God needs animals, insects. We don't know why God needs atoms and photons and electrons. And why? He could create the world in any system he chooses. He chose this system, obviously for a reason. A very good reason, because it won out against infinite other possibilities. So what God made me is significant to him. To me, I don't care. So if God makes me Jewish, I'm glad to be Jewish. If God makes me male, I'm glad to be male. If God puts me in the 20th century or 21st century, I'm fine with me. Gives me the parents that I have, that's great with me. Gives me the spouse that I have. Perfect, wonderful. So, wishing I were someone else is a sign of a lack of confidence, some kind of a irritation with your own skin. The solution is not to shed your skin. Only snakes can do that. The solution is find the purpose and the reason and the meaning of being who you are. Because there is meaning to it. So, what exactly is a non-Jew, a Gentile, thinking about himself when he says, maybe I should be a Jew, maybe I should convert? What's going on there? So the one thing we need to know is the world began with non-Jews. There were no Jews. For 2,000 years, 2,240 some years, there were no Jews. Because from Adam, who was not Jewish, until Abraham, who was the first Jew, there were 2,248 years. That's a long time. Biblical time. So the world began without Jews. The humans, the human race, for the first 2,000 years was purely non-Jews. And they were given commandments. Noah was a righteous person. Well, what does that tell you? That in the days of Noah there were commandments, and some obeyed the commandments and some didn't. Those who did were righteous. So how does Noah become a righteous person? He observed the commandments that had been given in his day. So here we have an entire universe populated by non-Jews with commandments from God on how to behave and how to make this world wonderful. In the generation of the flood, people were not obeying and they were not making this world wonderful. So God said, you guys are not helpful. So I'm going to start all over again with people who will take this world more seriously. So there was a flood. Noah and his family survived. They repopulated the world. Again, non-Jews. Only this time people were a little more devoted and a little more committed to the state of the world. And how do we know this? We know this because a generation later, after the flood, the entire human race cooperated on a project, completely unified in a single project, to build a tower that reaches beyond Earth's gravity. God didn't like the idea, so he interrupted the work and scattered the people into different languages, different countries, different cultures, so that they not cooperate on this project. But the fact that they could cooperate shows that they had developed social skills, they have become civilized, and life on Earth became livable. The previous generation had made life on Earth a misery for everybody. So, 2,000 years, the world is functioning. There are good people, there are bad people, there are better people. It's a functional universe. Then God introduces the Jewish people, beginning with Abraham. What happened? The conclusion we have to come to is that as far as Earth is concerned, as far as civilization is concerned, you don't need Jews. Certainly don't need to be Jewish. The introduction of Jews into history, into the earth, into the world, is to introduce an aspect of God that was not known before. So there are now two different kinds of projects. The first is the one that began with creation. Human beings making the world a civilized place, a safe place, a livable place. That's what human beings did. We weren't animals. We tamed the animal to some degree. And we made life for humans livable on planet Earth. Noah invented a plow. Great contribution. Without that, we wouldn't be able to feed families. Every person would be running around looking for something to eat on their own. So, making the world an inhabitable place, making the world more and more comfortable, more safe, more productive for the human being, is elevating the world to a higher, more noble state. Now there's a question of how much of God can we introduce into the world? Let's say the world settles down, people settle down, survival is no longer a terrible challenge. You have free time. When you have free time, you start asking questions. Life is livable, life is doable, life is comfortable. And we're grateful for that. And we thank God for that. But now in our free time, we're thinking, why? Why all this? And who do you ask? Obviously the Creator. Why? How much can we know? How much revelation can we tolerate? And how do we get there? That was the second project. And that was introduced through the Jewish people. A world at peace. Let's talk utopian here. A world at peace. People have what to eat. People are safe. People get along. They support each other. Life is good. Now I wonder why. What for? Is it all worth it? This is where Abraham comes in. Abraham comes in and says, idols are not true. Stop worshiping idols. What does that mean? Every idol that people worshipped was an impressive force in nature. You know, they had the rain gods, and they had the fertility gods, and they had the sun and the moon, the astrological signs. These are powerful forces. Without any one of them, there would be no life on earth. So they were really impressive things that people were worshiping. They weren't worshiping statues. The statue was a physical representation of what it is that they were worshiping. Which means the devotion to making nature more inhabitable became like the ceiling. That was the highest, most noble thought a person could have. Respect for nature. Abraham came along and said, you are part of nature. Don't worship yourself. You are as powerful a force in nature as the sun or the moon. So why are you worshiping them? They're your equal. Maybe not even equal. You may be even greater. So it doesn't make sense, and it's not befitting to worship something that is not much greater than you. If you're going to worship something, it should be something that is infinitely higher, infinitely more real, more true, more powerful than you. And there's only one thing more powerful than the human. And it's not an angel. It's God. So Abraham introduces God into the world beyond what everybody already knew, that God is the creator of the world. That was a given. The biggest of the idolaters recognized that God, the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, is the creator of the world. But they also believed that the creator of the world is done creating and he's moved on to other things. And the welfare of this universe, of this three-dimensional universe, is now in the hands of these forces of nature. Well, in some sense, that's true, because the state of the world is in our hands. But beyond knowing that God created the world, Abraham introduced this notion that God is the only being worthy of your worship. God is the only being more significant than the human. Infinitely. And therefore it's appropriate to worship him. So that became the Jewish role. Bring more of God to the world in addition to bringing the world closer to God. So not killing, not kidnapping, not committing adultery, not bringing false testimony. All of this is making the world a little more like God. God's taste. Judaism is about bringing more of God into the world. That idea is the Jew's responsibility, but in principle, Everyone can do that. Studying the Bible is not bringing the world closer to God, it's bringing God closer to the world. And that's what most religions were intended to do. But over time, it kind of becomes dulled, and instead of bringing God into the world, people started thinking, I got to bring myself to heaven. And so the welfare of earth was a little neglected. So you live in poverty, who cares? So you suffer, so you live under a dictatorship and you don't have freedom and who cares? The main thing is heaven. And so religion actually contributed to the deterioration of life on earth. Because if there's a better place, then why put your effort into this place? And that's where religion became its own worst enemy. Judaism maintained its purpose. We're not here to get to heaven. We're here to bring heaven down to earth, or make earth more heavenly. So those are the two aspects of divine service. How do you serve God? Well, either bring the world to a more godly state of being, or bring God, reveal more of God to the world. That's where the Torah comes in. The ultimate revelation, right? That's what it's called. The ultimate revelation of God to his creation was the event at Sinai. That's where God said, I am present on earth. Don't come to heaven. And the precise wording of it is, at the event at Sinai, we're told, God descended to the top of the mountain. Very clear, very strong. Don't come to heaven, I will come to you. So, what are we doing in the world? If you're Jewish, you should be knowledgeable in the Torah, because that's where God made himself available. And when you're knowledgeable in Torah, you have to share it with the rest of the world. Because God wants to come down into the world, doesn't mean into one Jewish neighborhood or one country called the Holy Land. God wants to be on earth in the most earthy parts of earth. The furthest place from the Holy Land needs to become holy. So whatever happened at Sinai was not supposed to remain at Sinai. So we've tried our best over the years to share not every commandment that Jews were given. Some of them are only for Jews. But the principle, the idea of bringing God into the world, that has become a universal thing. In addition to bringing the world closer to God. So when we behave ourselves, when we follow the rules, we're bringing the world closer to God. When we study God's commandments, when we study his Torah, when we think his thoughts, when we get to know him, that's bringing him down to the world. The ultimate utopian vision is, there will come a time very soon when life will be totally comfortable. Meaning the world will be as godly as it can be. What will the challenge be then? Bring more of God into the universe. A universe that is receptive, a universe that is ready, willing and able to to be a dwelling place for God himself. How much of God can you bring into this world? How much is infinite? And so for an infinity of time, we will be busy bringing the infinite God into this finite world. Does everybody have to be Jewish? No. But are we serving the same God? Absolutely. And does he need more than one thing? No. He just needs to be present on earth to the maximum capacity that the earth has. So we want to bring heaven down to earth. We don't want to become heaven. Because then you've eliminated earth. We want to stay earthy. But why can't earthy be godly? It can, it will, and it's our job to make it happen. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.